At the end of the war, although it had really been relegated to a secondary role by then, it's not perhaps got the glamour of the Tigers and the Panthers, but these are the tanks that did a lot of the fighting. To abbreviate it, is basically armoured Panzer fighting Kampfwagen vehicle. So Panzerkampfwagen is merely armoured fighting vehicle. It's used not just by the Germans. I'll show you an example of a Swiss Panzer shortly, but this, as I say, is the one we colloquially refer to as the Panzer III. Powered by a Maybach V12 petrol engine. All the German tanks, despite what the experts tell you, were powered by petrol engines. The gun in the turret is a 5cm or 50mm weapon. One of the great assets of the German Panzer Force in the first half of the war was this ability to improve. The Panzer III was designed originally with a 37mm gun, bars for its suspension, the same as most tanks do now, and has a fully rotating turret. Now the vehicle that's following it onto the arena is basically the same chassis, the same Panzer III chassis, same Maybach engine, the same torsion bar suspension system. But instead of a turret, and it can shoot as well, instead of a turret, this vehicle's got a fixed superstructure. It's known in German as a Sturmgeschütz, or assault gun, and they were designed originally to accompany infantry into the round before it goes into the vehicle. So that's what those shields on the sides are. Otherwise, you're looking at two virtually identical machines, one in the form of a tank, one as a self-propelled gun. We've now got what I guess by anyone's standards is the star of our show. This is our Tiger One. It's the only working Tiger One in the world. It is a perfectly genuine one, restored on the camp here at the Armour Base Repair Organisation, as it was then, with funds donated by the Heritage Lottery Fund. And although it's a big vehicle, although it's noisy, essentially it's just a scaled up Panzer III. It uses a bigger version of that Maybach V12 engine. It still retains torsion bar suspension, although you'll notice that instead of having lots of little wheels, one pair on each torsion bar, the Tiger, because of its greater weight, has overlapping and interleaving road wheels. They're still torsion bar, but there's far more of them, and the theory behind that, of course, is that in order to alleviate the ground pressure, which is the curse of these heavy tanks, as much rubber as possible bearing on the tracks makes all the difference. The Tiger was armed with a high velocity and very accurate 88mm gun. It had a coaxial machine gun, and we had a look at coaxial things this morning, plus a hull-mounted machine gun. To the right of the driver, you see the band of spare tracks there across the front. They were also equipped, because they were mainly aimed at probably invading Russia, they were fitted with a snorkel device because they were a bit too heavy to go over bridges, so they went underwater and breathed through a breather tube, but we're not doing that anymore. It doesn't do the tank a lot of good. That particular tank was captured after an action in Tunisia involving Churchill tanks of the 48th Royal Tank Regiment, and you can, if you get up close, see the scars which we've highlighted, where the rounds from the Churchill came in, and we think at one point caused the turret perhaps to jam, probably scared, if not wounded, the crew, and meant that almost a fully operational Tiger fell into British hands. We captured one before, but in such a state that it was destroyed before we could capture it and take it away. But this one was captured in working order. It was sent to Tunis, where King George VI and Winston Churchill inspected it. It came back to Britain, was displayed on Horse Guards Parade for a while, evaluated up at Chertsey and down here at Lulworth, and then presented to the Tank Museum. It really is an impressive vehicle to see. I'd also like to draw your attention to two other vehicles here, courtesy of the StuG Foundation. That's the little StuG 250 half-track moving off now, and the big 251 that follows it. The Germans were great exponents of the use of these vehicles, both for personnel transport, reconnaissance, and in the case of the 251, everything from flamethrowers to ambulances, but ideally as troop transports. And that meant that just like Warrior in the army today, German troops, the Panzer Grenadiers, last minute they have to start the fight. So they were an integral part of the Panzer divisions that swept first across France and later across the wide open spaces of Russia. So it's really an interesting setup here to see so much German armour, all of it absolutely authentic, all rolling around the arena at the same time. Tracks on the Tiger are enormous broad things with metal pins through them. Those on the half tracks are very sophisticated. They have roller bearings at each track link. It makes them very easy running. But what it costs to build them in the first place, you just can't imagine. It was completely over the top for the sort of purpose they were being used for. Another thing, while we're on the subject of tracks, if you moved your Tiger anywhere from A to B, any great distance, it's a full running order. Put on the wheels, put on the wider tracks, add the extra tin work in order to give the tank a fighting chance of surviving over softer ground, which is why you need the wider tracks in the first place. The armour on the front of Tiger is about 100mm thick. The tank is equipped with high quality optics. There's always one of the things about the Tiger, there were never many of them, but what you could be pretty sure of, whatever that gun was aimed at it would hit, and whatever it hit, it would destroy. And that's why I think you'll find such a fear of the Tiger in any literature at all about German tanks. The Tiger, in fact any tanks, any nationality, the Tiger is the cult tank, the one most people were scared stiff of. In fact, it was painted on most tanks that left the factory for the second half of the Second World War. That Tiger, I mentioned earlier, was captured after an action with 48th Royal Tank Regiment. This was in Tunisia in 1943. So it hadn't really had a very long combat career, and inside it's in well, of course it's been restored, but still in remarkably good condition. The big problem we had was that when they brought it over here for evaluation, they took the engine out to find out how it works and cut red holes in it. So we had to find a new engine, and that was easier said than done. It's actually got the engine from one of our King Tigers in it at the moment, but it's basically the same power unit that made that H-40 point. In fact, slope armour will always work as it's supposed to, and it counts very much on both tanks being on the level and facing one another. Both tanks have turrets with full 360-degree traverse, but then we come down to this business of firepower. The gun in the Sherman is a medium velocity 76mm gun. It could deal with the Tiger, but probably not from the front. The Tiger's going to have to be caught in a vulnerable position. The Sherman is going to have to get round to the side or behind him and pump the rounds in from there. The Tiger's gun is an 88mm. It's a converted anti-aircraft gun. It is a lot more powerful than the Sherman's gun, probably actually a lot more accurate. If the Tiger gets in the first shot, you can forget almost a half-track motorbike, although really it's a tracked vehicle with a little wheel on the front. They were issued originally to the Luftwaffe parachute units because they were virtually air portable, and they provided them with a lightweight tracked vehicle suitable to pull a cart. Compare this very sophisticated little vehicle with the Pz.Kpfw. It's a marvellous example of the lengths the Germans went to produce quite striking, horribly expensive, and ultimately not totally practical vehicles. Because the parachute units in particular were not often used in their airborne role after King, the Lancer tankers in quite a master collection for Ewok or airborne actually, but quite recently we sent it away and it's been totally restored by the Crompton Military Vehicle Collection, financially supported by Lane Street, and it really is now in immaculate condition. You can see the driver sitting there in the front, and then he carries two crewmen and the little sort of settee at the back. And they would normally carry a small airborne trailer on a hook behind that. They're fabulous little vehicles, very popular among the preservationists because they're easy to keep and transport, but very sophisticated. The handlebars don't just steer the front wheel, they work brakes on the track unit, so you can in fact skid steering. In fact, it's possible to drive the thing with the front wheel missing. I don't recommend it, but it can be done. So there you've got a collection of German armour going from the A7V, which we saw at the very beginning this morning, through these panzers of the Second World War. But now I'm going to show you some German armour of more recent time.